6. I am ecstatic to be here today with a good friend of mine, Becky Green. Becky Green owns a farm called Sparrowhawk Hill Farm in Western Oregon. And what she does here is she grows plants naturally.
That's right.
In an organic way. And I thought, well, we couldn't have 30 Days of Opera Organically without visiting a farm that grows things organically. And I just have a few questions here for you, Becky.
All right.
I am fascinated about the idea of cultivating living things. And one of the things that's very important to Opera Organically is the idea that we as humans can cultivate our voices rather than force them to be something that we want them to be. And I wanted to ask you, how does that come into your work? What is tangible about your work that we can see as singers that might help us understand the difference between allowing our voices to grow and forcing them to grow?
Well, the main thing really is if you look at the difference between what happens to something that we grow like this, where in this case we've started it as a cutting from a plant and we've allowed it to grow in its own pot at its own rate, as opposed to things that you will often see sold in nurseries and in the supermarkets, where the whole goal of that is to make the thing bloom, and bloom more than what's really good for it.
Right.
So you'll often notice you'll take a big azalea home to somebody for a gift, but if you don't take care of that plant right away, get it out of the pot, get it into the ground or into a bigger pot, the thing's going to die. Because what's happened is they've given it way too much fertilizer, the root ball is way too small, it's got a lot more growth on top and a lot more flowers than the root system can sustain, and I would assume that your voice, it would be like that.
Yeah.
So if you push it.
Definitely. That's really interesting that you mention that, because one of the patterns that we're seeing right now in the opera world are singers who are pushed out, their voices are pushed out very, very soon, and then what happens is they have successful careers for a few years, but I suppose the metaphor could be that they don't have a large enough root ball, they don't have a large enough foundation to survive. And I'm guessing that the reason that when we go to a store and we buy azaleas like that have been forced grown, they are grown like that for financial reasons, because they can sell more faster.
Well, and they have to have them bloom at a certain time.
Yeah.
To sell. So they push it to do that, and they put it in a store to sell it, and then they have to sell it right away. Once it's gone beyond its bloom, then it won't be very healthy.
Okay.
Unless you do something with it.
And people who sell those plants really have no interest in doing something with it. Like if you go to some store down the road and they're selling these azaleas and they go out of bloom, what happens to those?
They'll either throw them out, maybe they'll recycle if they're good, but usually the plants are not grown. They're not continued to grow.
Okay, so that's interesting, because I think that happens also in the opera world. The people who are selling our voices aren't really interested in, well, most of the time, they're not really interested in whether they're healthy or not. It's just whether they can sell.
Well, you're the one that's interested in your health.
Right.
It's just take care of your voice. It's just like take care of your body or taking care of a plant.
Right,
Where you fertilize it just what it needs, not too much.
Right.
And when it needs to get into a bigger ball, or as it begins to develop, you put it into a bigger pot, or you put it out where it's supposed to grow.
Right, right.
This one back here is an example of a plant that was forced. It also has weed in it. We'll talk about weeds. This was forced, and what happened, it was in a really small pot like this. And this guy, you can see where the original plant was. It practically died back, and what we had to do was pot it up successively and fertilize it till we finally are getting it back to growing, but you can see that it's not a particularly desirable specimen of hibiscus, which is what this is.
Right.
So.
Well, that was one thing I was wondering just now is, can I ask you personally why you and Tom, your husband, feel so passionate about saving a plant like this?
No good reason, I guess, except that, well, for one thing, it's my brother's.
Okay.
Which helps.
But
secondly, it's a beautiful flower.
Yeah.
If you look at it, it's
yeah.
absolutely gorgeous. I
Yeah.
don't know if you can see that there.
Yeah.
But, I mean, if you can save it, then it's worth it. Just to look at it and to know that you've done something like that. And we really try to save them rather than kill them. But if we do kill them, then we do, like when you did your second video, I think it was, on the horse poo.
Yeah.
they go into the recycle and make compost and become plants to help other plants, compost to help other plants. So we're still keeping them in the cycle.
That is fantastic. I think that what you are doing here can teach us singers so much about the value of, first of all, looking at the reality of where our voices are at any point. Because what we really need are caretakers. We have to be the caretakers of our own voice. We can start to look at our voices as plants. Because I think what happens a lot of times is we, the singers, get out of control. We go to a voice teacher, for instance, and they say, wow, you have this really fantastic voice, you can sing this role, this role, this role. We get all excited, and we start to give the responsibility for caretaking of our voice over to another person. And that can translate very easily to an agent and to other people who are asking us to do things as singers that are not exactly healthy for the voice.
Before you're ready to do it.
Right. And
so you wouldn't, like these plants here, we've started them from seed.
Wow.
But we've kept them here in the greenhouse because they're not ready to go out in the garden yet.
Right, they need the protection of this.
That's right. If I put them out right now, either the gopher will get them or they'll die.
Wow.
So what we do is we keep them in here until they're big enough.
Right.
Healthy enough to put out there.
That is fantastic.
So that's what you're talking about, I think.
Yeah, that is fantastic, and that's what Opera Organically is about, is teaching us to start to have this kind of vocabulary as singers with our teachers, with this supportive team, but around us, but at the same time ultimately taking responsibility for caretaking ourselves, and making sure that the supportive team around us is on the same page, that they are making the same choices that we would make if we were looking at our voices as a plant, as a beautiful flower. And I wanted to ask you about these little guys in here.
These are volunteers.
Okay, tell me about volunteers.
Okay, what happens is these little guys, they're annuals, which means they only live for one summer and then they are gone, but they seed all over the place.
Oh.
So even in a greenhouse like this, since we don't spray, these little guys will turn up in pots all over the greenhouse, and I kind of thought they were cute in here, so we kept them in here.
Well, that's a lesson too. I think when you're growing your voice, or when you're, in this case, saving your voice, rebuilding your voice, like Becky and Tom are doing with this plant, it's good to leave the volunteers. You never know what's going to come out of a time.
But this volunteer we don't need.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. Would you give us an introduction to weeds before we go out and...
Well, weeds are defined classically as things that are growing where you don't want them to.
Yeah.
So in some cases, a plant that you would want in one place becomes a weed somewhere else, and we've got examples of that out there.
Fantastic.
But these little guys, what happens with them is classically weeds grow way faster than the plant you really want.
Uh-huh.
So maybe we can go out and take a look at...
Yeah.
Because what we really want to do is we'll put a plant out. We want it to grow. We want to encourage it like you're encouraging your voice.
Right.
But I think you were talking earlier about ideas and
Yes.
how somebody can give you an idea that is inimical to your voice.
Yeah.
So if somebody tells you you can't do something with your voice and you believe them, whether it's true or not, it sits there.
Yeah.
Well, that's what these guys are.
Okay.
And they tend to grow fast.
Right.
because for us, they're negative to the plant, but for you, it's negative to your voice.
Right.
Because then you'll never get your mind around whatever that thing is that they told you couldn't do.
Right.
So when we talk about weeds, we're talking about things that get them when they're small.
Right.
Like this one. Don't wait till they get big like the ones we're going to see out there.
Oh, fantastic. Let's go see them.